I'm happy to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Zach Phillips. Zach is the terrestrial invertebrate conservation ecologist at Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, but he recently described himself to me as a conservation naturalist, which is much shorter and I thought so beautiful, so I really like that. Zach primarily studies insects and birds and their relationships to plants. He works with colleagues, students, and volunteers to learn more about plant-animal relationships and how to conserve them. And in my opinion, he has a great talent for getting people interested in things that might otherwise be considered creepy crawlies. So here's Zach.
Thank you, Heather. All right. Hi. I'm going to talk about the Elings Park transformation project that Heather introduced. And I'm going to focus on how some of the local wildlife here has responded to our planting of about an acre of native plants at the park. And if you haven't been to Elings Park, it's about 1.5 miles west of here. Go after the symposium. And you'll hear, after listening to Doug's talk, you'll definitely hear the influence of his ideas throughout this talk. Is it okay if I call you Doug? I don't want to be too familiar. We just met. All right. So like Heather mentioned, this project has involved a lot of people, both in the research and in the actual restoration, including volunteers who have done things from digging holes, planting plants, and helping us with our biodiversity surveys. When I say transformation, I'm talking about our conversion of an acre of about an acre of weedy non-native plants into an acre of mostly coastal scrub habitat, which is a critical habitat for a lot of California's plants and animals. And one of our hopes has been that by creating and managing this habitat, we'd attract and support some of the native wildlife, specifically birds and pollinators that depend on it. We planted 28 species, but these are kind of the 5 main characters of the talk, these 5 plants. So they'll be recurring throughout. From clockwise, from top left, California sagebrush, California buckwheat, coyote bush, bush sunflower, and giant wild rye, a big tall grass. And we had 2 questions. Once the plants were planted, we started watching the animals, what animals were visiting the site and how they were interacting with the plants. To answer these 2 central questions, is the transformation working? So is it attracting and supporting the native wildlife? And what are the keystone plants? So what are the major contributors, to use some of the language from the last talk? To answer that first question, is the transformation working? We have been conducting bird and pollinator surveys both on the transformed acre and on an adjacent reference acre that's still just weedy, non-native plants. And all the results I'm going to tell you about today are from spring and summer 2025, March to August. So for the birds, in that period, we saw 8 species only in the transformed acre that we didn't see in the weedy acre, and all 8 are native birds, including the 3 photographed up here, the ash-throated flycatcher, the chipping sparrow, and the wren tit. And then we didn't see any unique species in the weedy acre, but we saw 28 species in both plots. That's that central list of species. Notably, one of the birds we saw just in the transformed acre is a first species record for the park, for Elings Park, the yellow-headed blackbird. And it's probably not due to lack of looking, because Elings Park is a birding hotspot. And one of the people that makes Elings Park a birding hotspot is here today. He'll be one of the panelists, Hugh Ranson. And on his own birding walks at Elings, he's seen more rare species records in the transformed plot. So here are a couple examples he posted on iNaturalist, a green-tailed towhee that was hiding in the shrubs, and a common poorwill, which might be enjoying some camouflage from the mulch that we added to the plot. Similar to our bird survey results, our pollinators, there seems to be more native pollinator activity and greater pollinator diversity in the transformed acre than the weedy acre. Some of the pollinator groups we only saw in the transformed acre include masked bees, which is the top left on the blue circle, and these long-abdomened carrot wasps on the bottom left of the blue circle, and also a bunch of snout moths. So to return to that first question, is the transformation working? Based on our surveys this spring and summer, it seems to be working well so far, attracting native birds and pollinators. On to the next question, what are the keystone plants that might be behind the success of the transformation? For the birds, we surveyed a variety of bird-plant interactions, some that you're probably familiar with, like perching or vocalizing, and some you might be less familiar with, like insect thrashing. So you thinking about Doug's analogy to the sausage of a caterpillar, this would be like if you saw a bird really angry at a sausage and just smashing it. And it might be trying to remove hairs on the caterpillar to make it more edible, or bashing out the gut of the caterpillar if it has toxic plant materials inside of it. I focused on insect gleaning for the surveys, or I'll talk about that mostly today because that's a decent measure of how valuable a plant is as an insect resource to birds. And by insect gleaning, I just mean birds foraging insects or other arthropods like spiders directly off the surfaces of the plants, whether that be leaves, stems, flowers, other surfaces. So in our acre, coyote bush seems to be the keystone plant for insect gleaning birds. There was the most insect gleaning activity on coyote bush and the most bird species observed doing that. And there were a few breeding pairs that were actively doing that. The lower picture shows a female common yellowthroat, a warbler, and her partner were constantly foraging for about 3 weeks this summer for insects for their kind of bumbling fledgling that was following them around. But it's hard to see what specific insects are being foraged. So to get a closer look to see if coyote bush might be an important source of caterpillars, we did caterpillar surveys of coyote bush. And we used a couple methods to survey the caterpillars, but the most effective one in this case was UV light at night, because the caterpillars that blend in during the day really well pop out under the UV light. And so you can see on the left, there's a coyote bush caterpillar kind of blending in well, and on the right, the UV light making it more apparent. We didn't just survey coyote bush for caterpillars. We surveyed 10 species total, 10 plant species. 7 of them didn't have any caterpillars. Coyote bush had the most, with California sagebrush coming in at a close second. And most of the caterpillars on coyote brush are a coyote bush specialist moth, Macaria marcascaria. So its host plant is coyote bush. And if coyote bush hadn't been in the transformation area, then this caterpillar population wouldn't have been there. The adults might have been there, but not the caterpillars. This wasn't, combined, the insect gleaning behavior results and the caterpillar survey results suggest coyote bush could be an important keystone plant for breeding birds, not only in our transformation site, but also in coastal scrub habitats. This isn't really an expected result because coyote bush isn't known, or at least celebrated, as an important food plant of insects for birds. So our results suggest it might be worth exploring this in other coastal scrub habitats in general. And I don't want to inflate coyote bush's ego too much, so I'm just going to mention there are other plants performing other important roles for the birds at the site. And one example is giant wild rye, the very tall growing grass. I think it gets up to about 8 meters tall. Not 8 meters, 8 feet. 8 feet. Can I still call you Doug? I got that wrong? 8 feet. And he was British, and I've been sitting next to him the whole time, so there might have been an absorption of. And this is just an example of some of the birds that perched on giant wild rye. So it attracted flycatchers, sparrows, warblers. All of them used giant wild rye as a perch to look for predators, or to, in the case of the common yellowthroats, to find where their fledgling was. To survey for keystone plants for pollinators, we focused on one pollinator plant interaction, the most relevant for pollinator events, or pollination events, which is the contact between the insect and the flowers, or the plant's reproductive parts. And California buckwheat was the plant that attracted the greatest diversity and greatest abundance of native pollinators, as you can see in the figure on the right. And this wasn't surprising. California buckwheat is commonly recommended by gardeners and restoration ecologists. It's known as a hub for pollinators in California. So consistent with what people know already. And these are some more photographs from Hugh at the transformation site of a few of the pollinators he saw, mostly bees and wasps, but there are also beetles and flies there as well. And this is my favorite pollinator on buckwheat at the site, the brown tenuca. And it's actually within the same superfamily, I think, as the owlet moths, even though it doesn't look like it at all. It's a day-flying moth, but not a butterfly. I won't get into that now. Here's a little video of it. So the adult's nectaring on the buckwheat, but its host plant is actually giant wilddrye. We didn't find any of the caterpillars on giant wilddrye, but it might be a situation where we just have to wait another year. So we're going to survey again this year. If anyone wants to volunteer to help do nocturnal UV light caterpillar surveys. So as we continue our pollinator and bird surveys, we're learning more about how diverse plant communities support diverse animal communities. One example of that is a plant I haven't mentioned yet, coast goldenbush, Isocoma menziesii. Hardly got touched by birds this spring and summer, but when it went to seed this fall, became one of the main seed food plants for white-crowned sparrows and some other migrating sparrows. I'm going to briefly mention another study we're doing at the site, which might have some interesting bearing on the caterpillar pupation that Doug mentioned. We haven't really explored this. We're looking at how two different weed killing methods affect the growth of our native plants, and those being sheet mulching, where you layer mulch over a layer of cardboard, versus tarping. In our case, we're using black tarp to cover the weeds. We've only started assessing the data recently, but based on our first monitoring, the plants in the sheet mulch plots have grown about twice the size of the plants in the tarped plots, and we'll continue working on this throughout the year. Different factors might be causing this, like more and better nutrients in the soil or less death of good microbiota in the soil. And, okay, 3-minute warning. I think I got it. And the Elings Transformation Project has also kind of been a keystone project for the garden. It's been a hub of collaborations of all kinds. One of those has been the gallery exhibit that Heather mentioned, currently showing at the garden, which is the result of artists and scientists working together to get birds and plants and bugs on the walls. And we're continuing to train students and volunteers in field methods like insect surveys and bird surveys at Elings Park. So it's kind of acting like a mini urban field station. We're also doing a lot of interesting outreach. I don't want to be presumptuous, but I think we're doing the best caterpillar-themed pop-up dance party in Santa Barbara. Thanks, everybody. And the two other leads on the research are pictured here. Dr. Sarah Cusser leading one of the walks that if you want to go on this year, go back to Heather's talk and look at that barcode. And Dr. Stephanie Clark measuring some of the plants. Thank you. Questions? Yeah.
How resilient is this? If you guys were to walk away, come back 5 or 10 years later, do you think this little patch would have survived, or would it just go back to what it was?
I will never walk away. No, yeah. No, that's a great question. That's a question that kind of drives some of our decisions. I'll repeat the question. Zach, you seem neat. Can I be your friend? Yes. So how resilient is this sort of restoration? So if we were to walk away and stop managing it, or at least if the garden were to stop managing it, how resilient would it be? I don't know is the quick answer, but that's part of our calculations when we're choosing projects. And one of the reasons we've involved so much of the community is to make it not just a garden project, but to make it a community project that other people in the community might be able to sustain in the future. But I don't know, if we just walked away right now and nobody managed it at all, I don't know. Good question. Do I get to choose who? Okay, nice. Yeah. I'll start from the back, very back. Blue shirt.
Okay.
Yeah.
In Carpinteria, we have bluffs and marsh nature parks, and they were planted with natives back at the turn of the decade. And so I would like you to come and survey them.
I will do that. Maybe. Sorry. I think the garden has, great people, as you've seen, that can help think about that question.
But I think that, they're pretty much left alone now. We don't have people weeding them, and they're doing great.
Oh, okay, so that's an example of they've done fine without management.
It was a little bit different than your
Did I forget to repeat the question again? She asked, Zach, you seem neat. Can I be your friend? I don't know, sorry. Who's the next question?
Well, Andre, I would say that the
there
garden
we
is hoping to build resources to be able to get out and support community-driven projects to both do planning, do planting, and then do monitoring over time. And so the idea of getting out to the Carpinteria Bluffs and doing some training for volunteers to help monitor is something that we can certainly do.
Sounds awesome.
Last question.
Last question.
I'm interested in stone plants, particularly for landscaping. And I'm thinking, when you talk about coyote bush, which is kind of a big ragey plant, but there's cultivars like Fishing Point. Do they have the same thing for buck?
So she's asking if two different forms of coyote bush, one's a prostrate form and one's the tall form that I've been talking about, have maybe similar ecologies?
Right.
Yeah,
They're more
similar value.
landscape because they're more compact or they're more
Yeah,
landscapeable.
I'm going back to a link to a talk that I cited but didn't quote. There it is. So the talk that Alcine Green-Kidder gave for CNPS Marin gets into that exact question. So she kind of studied ecological differences between the two forms. And I think one thing I remember she found was I don't think she looked at caterpillar differences, but she looked at galliform insect differences on the plants. And I think it was the taller form that had twice as many galliform insects. So it suggests there could be other major insect community differences, which would lead to differential value for birds. But yeah, I recommend watching that talk. It's on YouTube.
So
Yeah.
it's a CNPS Marin.
Yeah. Thank you.